To call this council workshop education session to order. First, I'll start off with the land acknowledgement. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands in which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have had in the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississauga and Chippewas recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the William Treaties of 1923. A shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Thank you. All right, so may I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Gallo, second by Councillor Gartner. Any questions or comments on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Any direct declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Item 5.1, Drinking Water Quality Management Standards, DWQMS, Standard of Care, will have a presentation by Bridget Roth, Principal Consultant, Acclaims Environmental Inc. Mr. Downey, would you like to provide an introduction?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So good evening and thank you for attending the workshop. As owners of the drinking water system for Aurora, you are responsible to ensure that safe drinking water to the residents of Aurora. This workshop is to help you understand what your roles and responsibilities are, learn a little bit about our drinking water system, and of course, ask any questions that you may have along the way. We have no problem answering questions as the presentation goes on. It should take about 45 minutes or so to do the presentation. This evening presentation will be done by Bridget Roth. She's comes to us from Guelph. She's a principal consultant at Acclaims Environmental and is actually our internal auditor. So she's pretty familiar with our system and our staff. She has 25 years of compliance and management systems and is also not only our auditor, but our trainer for staff. And so with that, Bridget, I'll turn the floor over to you. As I say, Council, you're more than welcome to ask questions, and I suggest that you ask them as we go along because they may be of interest to other members of Council. At the end of this session, I will be asking each member of Council to sign a document stating that you are aware of your roles and responsibilities with regards to being owner of the drinking water system in Aurora. So with that, there you go.
Thank you.
I forgot Justina. Terrible. So Justina is also here, our coordinator of water and wastewater, and she is also here to answer any questions, any technical questions you may have with regards to our drinking water system. I apologize, Justina.
Perfect. Well, welcome to both of you. We look forward to your presentation. You may begin.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. I'm happy to be here to speak to you on your important statutory standard of care responsibility under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And the title of the presentation is called Taking Care of Your Drinking Water. It's reflective of the province's Taking Care of Your Drinking Water Guide, which is specifically prepared to describe your responsibilities and ask the questions you can ask related to the different scenarios you could be faced in your decision-making capabilities and capacities. And so, and it's included actually in printed form in your printed handouts. But anyone who is participating online can also search for the guide by searching the words Ontario and taking care of your drinking water, and the web page comes up related to that. This presentation helps answer the series of questions included in the guide's Check Your Knowledge section, and so we're going to be answering those this evening. And so we'll move on there. And I have there we go. Why are we here? We have a statutory standard of care under the Safe Drinking Water Act, specifically Section 19 of the Act. As council, as member of council, you are the owner of the drinking water system locally to you. You need to understand your personal duty under the statutory standard of care. You're asked to be informed, to ask questions, get answers on anything that you require more information about and decisions you're being faced with, and to be vigilant. One of the major outcomes of the Walkerton inquiry following the Walkerton tragedy was a recognition that there was complacency at all levels. And so the vigilance in your duties as owners of the drinking water system is critically important. And also a part of this presentation is to provide an overview of Aurora's drinking water system. In the Section 19 of the Safe Drinking Water Act, it's the statutory standard of care, and it describes the owner shall exercise level of care, diligence, and skill that a reasonably prudent person would be expected to exercise in a similar situation, and act honestly, competently, and with integrity, ensuring the protection and safety of the users of the municipal drinking water system, or be guilty of an offense. So if you're found guilty of an offense, the conviction could include a fine of up to $4 million or up to 5 years in prison. While this Section 19 of the Act has not been tested in Ontario following the Walkerton tragedy, it's still in place. And actually, the Municipal Act provisions in the protection of decision makers on councils is exempt in this place here. Section 19 is exempt from those Municipal Act provisions for the protection of decision makers on municipal boards and councils. The next slide describes that there's a shared responsibility for the provision of safe drinking water. So we have provincial ministries, the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, who is the agency that oversees and is the agency that provides approvals and inspects the drinking water systems in Ontario through their provincial inspectors. The Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care is also involved in the provision of safe drinking water as that activity. The provision of safe water is a public health issue, and the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care also oversees all of the public health units across the province. Locally to you, it's the York Region Public Health that is where your local medical officer of health works out of, and this is the person to whom your water operators would report adverse water quality incidents or adverse drinking water quality tests to the local medical officer of health, and as well as to the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, the Spills Action Center. There's a shared responsibility with the drinking water system owner, as you are the owners of the town of Aurora's drinking water system. You have a direct role in the provision of safe drinking water through some of your financial decisions that you'll be faced with through, capital budgets and operational budgets and capital plans and sustainable financial plans that are being brought to your attention for approval. And then within the town of Aurora, you have operations services, who is your accredited operating authority. So in order to operate a drinking water system in Ontario, that operating authority needs to be accredited to the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard. There are duties under the Safe Drinking Water Act. In the next slide described sections 11 to 18. And so on the left-hand side, on this slide, the owner is responsible to ensure that an accredited operating authority is always operating your drinking water system. And so that maintenance of accreditation is important to be able to be authorized to operate that system. Also, the duty of the owner is to report to the public on any matter required by regulations, such as when there are adverse water quality incidents or emergencies, such as maybe there's a water advisory ordered by your local medical officer of health. And also there are annual report requirements to publicly share the water quality information from your drinking water system operations on an annual basis by February 28th every year. The annual report is available to the public. And then if you had a third party operating authority, there's a duty to have an agreement with that third party operating authority, which doesn't apply to you in this case because you have internal staff as the accredited operating authority. In many cases, you can delegate a lot of responsibilities to experts, and but not Section 19. So that statutory standard of care is still the owner's responsibility and duty to make sure that you carry out those duties under the statutory standard of care. You can rely, though, on experts in good faith. So there could be some financial decisions or infrastructure decisions on which you're basing your decisions through studies or condition assessments or some financial experts' opinions on how to have a financially viable and sustainable drinking water system. And so you're allowed to rely on experts and their reports in good faith. The operating authority has several duties under the Act described under sections 11 to 18, where the operating authority must provide water that meets the Ontario drinking water quality standards, that the labs use to test for various parameters in the water supply is by labs that are accredited and licensed to carry out those drinking water tests in this province, and that the parameters that you require to be tested, that accredited lab is eligible to test for those parameters. The operating authority must operate the drinking water system in accordance with the Act and all the regulations that are included within it. There's an expectation that you maintain your drinking water system in a fit state of repair. And so that every aspect of your drinking water system is going to function as intended with a good maintenance program in place. You have requirements based on the class of drinking water system you have. For example, having a class 2 water distribution system in Aurora requires a certain number of hours for your operational team to attain and meet every single year. Every drinking water system in Ontario have operators that must have between 30 and 50 hours of training every single year. You also have to ensure that the drinking water system is operated by certified operators. So these operators require, again, certification that is not expired, that is valid. These water operator certificates are valid for a period of 36 months and get renewed every 36 months with the proper training and training hours and experiences. Or else operated by trained persons or supervised by qualified personnel as well. And then you have sampling, testing, and monitoring requirements through Reg 170 as an example that specifies the number of water quality samples you shall take. Some are population-based, some are requirements for chlorine residuals monitoring, which is the acceptable disinfectant in the distribution network. And then also you report as required. So especially when there are adverse water quality incidents, reports on the annual performance of the results of the sampling and testing that you carry out through that annual report I mentioned earlier. The next slide helps describe the organizational structure of your operating authority. So at the top level, you have the owner of the drinking water system as represented by members of council. And then there are top management roles who are your senior decision makers, also to which the statutory standard of care applies in their decision-making roles and responsibilities. And then the operational team with certified operators led by a supervisor of water and wastewater. And then you also have a manager and project administration on another part of your organization. The next slide describes the QMS policy commitment. Through the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard, you're required to have a quality policy that includes these required commitments. Aurora does meet the required commitments, and so it is committed, the town is committed to ensuring a consistent supply of safe, high-quality drinking water through commitment and of system maintenance, as well committed to maintaining and continually improving the quality management system through a commitment to your consumers to provide safe drinking water, and of course, to comply with all applicable legislation and regulations. This is a table that helps describe the competencies achieved by your members of top management and the year's experience so that members of council can understand that there are competent and experienced people making some decisions in their senior decision-making roles. You have a manager of operations with a class 2 certification recognized through the Ontario Wastewater Certification Office and 33 years experience. And then the supervisor has a class 3 water certification with 16 years experience. And your program coordinator has a water quality analyst certification with 12 years experience. And then certified operators with class 2 operator certification with years experience between ranging from 6 to 21 years. The multi-barrier approach was a major outcome of the Walkerton inquiry. So it was recognized that the multi-barrier approach is necessary to protect the safety of the drinking water system, and recognizing that a failure at one of the barriers does not necessarily contribute to an emergency situation or a catastrophic condition or an outbreak. The multiple barriers working together and being effective at achieving their intended outcomes consistently should prevent emergencies and outbreaks and catastrophic conditions. And so with the source water protection, the acts that relate to water sources for a community's water supply, you have the Ontario Water Resources Act, which existed pre-Walkerton tragedy. And the points of the Ontario Water Resources Act is the proper management of your water resources, also preventing contamination of communities' water supplies, and regulating the establishment of wells and permits to take water and water quantity types of issues as well. Another major outcome related to source water protection is under the Clean Water Act, which was enacted in 2006, through which a main point was to recognize that decisions about watersheds or the safety of water sources should be made on a watershed-wide basis. And your decisions locally here could potentially adversely impact another community's water source, or the quality of the water source or quantity of water available to that community. And the first task of the source protection committees, established again based on watersheds, was to come up with the source protection plans that include identifying what are the vulnerable areas for each community's water supply, and what are the existing drinking water threats that exist within those vulnerable areas, or what types of activities should be prevented from being established within those vulnerable areas. And then as part of source protection plans that are approved by the province, there are also source protection policies that are each owner's duties to implement. So there are source protection policies applicable to your community here, and the source protection policies are expected to be implemented by each owner for their communities, the municipalities. And the Safe Drinking Water Act then covers the remainder of the barriers of the multi-barrier approach, such as having adequate treatment processes with the raw water characteristics in mind, with the source water in mind, and then inspection programs to continually monitor, sample, test, check that everything is operating as intended, carrying out the sampling, testing, and monitoring programs, and then all the way to a secure distribution network to make sure that the water quality that you have from your treatment, your water supply providers remains of good quality all the way to the consumers, the furthest consumers tap. And so there are stipulations under regulations under the Safe Drinking Water Act that help manage and the requirements of operations and maintenance activities for drinking water systems in Ontario. The next slide helps to depict the various water sources you have within the town of Aurora's water supply. So you have on the left-hand side of the map is a water supply from Peel region, and this is through York region. And so there's a water supply from Peel region, and at the south end of the map, you'll see that there's a water supply from the city of Toronto. And then there are a number of facilities operated by York region within the boundaries of the town of Aurora that then has a blended water supply for your community here. And there are a number of points on the map that are indicating many of the York Region facilities, facilities operated by York Region, ensuring, of course, proper treatment and disinfection is achieved at the well sites. And then there are zones depicted to adequately manage the pressures within the zones of your distribution network. And locally to you, you have 7 production wells within Aurora that, again, are operated by York Region. These maps are also included in the printed handout materials. The next map, as I mentioned earlier, there are source protection areas. So this map helps to identify the wellhead protection areas within your community. The ones with the deepest colors are the most highly vulnerable areas around the wellheads that you have in Aurora. And then the further you move away from the wellheads is a lower vulnerability score. Again, as part of the source protection plans that are approved by the province, the first task was to identify these vulnerable areas for source waters, identify any water quality and quantity issues, identify the drinking water threats located within these vulnerable areas, establish the level of risk, and then develop those policies to address your significant risks. And those policies, again, are for each municipality to implement through the source protection plan. If you were to add a new water source within your community, it must be updated in your source protection map to indicate the new vulnerable areas before water can be supplied to your users, your consumers. And then this next slide just depicts an image from the York Region Source Protection Report that can be accessed online, and it's providing some information on the threats identified within each of these vulnerable areas and the various risk management activities that are carried out by York Region to help address and mitigate the risks to water supplies. We have part of the multi-barrier approach is effective treatment. So you have 2 main source types. 80% are surface water types from Peel Region and the City of Toronto through York Region. And then 20% of your water supply comes from the 7 local wells, local to you, and also operated by York Region. Water quality is monitored continuously at your various sites. There's continuous monitoring equipment. The instrumentation help to monitor real-time data from each of the well sites for adequate disinfection, as an example. And then the town staff also monitor water quality information within the distribution network. And there are a number of sample points within the distribution system that help confirm water quality throughout any given month. And then there's well water treatment and chlorination is carried out again by York Region. Your distribution system goals, you would like to have an effective design and build of your system where you're always meeting your maximum daily use for residential and your industrial, commercial, institutional customers. You always have a reserved amount or quantity of water for firefighting. And also you want to have operational redundancy so that your water demand doesn't exactly equal the water supply. And so you want to accommodate potential emergencies such as a large main break that could consume or waste some of the water from a water main break, as an example. So having that operational redundancy so that you can always meet the demands of your consumers and the firefighting amount of water that you should have. Effective operation as well includes pressure management. So you want to maintain good, adequate pressures throughout your distribution system so that you're preventing issues like back siphonage into your distribution network. Maintaining adequate chlorine residuals. Again, this is in the furthest reaches of your distribution network, even in the low flow conditions or where water might age. We understand that chlorine residual can degrade with time or in certain conditions. And so operational staff will respond to those areas that are known to have some chlorine residual issues and carry out flushing and cleaning programs. As well, leak detection programs are important to carry out to identify where your system leaks are and what programs you can implement to mitigate or prevent some of these leaks. And condition assessments also factor into potentially identifying and addressing some of these leaks within your distribution network. And leaks left undetected could undermine other assets in your linear infrastructure, such as undermining, a sanitary main or a storm system, or your roadway could be undermined as well if a leak is left unattended. You have timely response to water main breaks so that you have the water supply that you need for your community, and preventive programs to ensure that your infrastructure can have a good asset life and longevity. And of course, you want to ensure reliability of your drinking water service. Infrastructure planning, you ensure ongoing infrastructure sustainability with these multi-year capital plans, so 10-year capital plans that are coordinated with other divisions. These capital plans are driven by age considerations, so water main age, the failures, so where you've had water main breaks in your distribution network, and so the failures history factor in. Also some condition assessments, which are some of these assessments done by experts that you can rely and make decisions based on some of their information and reports. And then also coordinating with other large capital projects, maintenance and replacement projects. You annually have a requirement through the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard to review infrastructure needs. And so you have annual infrastructure meetings to discuss these priorities, but also considering changing risks because your capital plans are 10-year plans. The consideration of current risk assessment outcomes helps to confirm that you're addressing changing risks as well in your capital plans. And then emergency repairs, when they are required, are carried out by contractors. You have effective monitoring and reporting programs with regular sampling and monitoring. That includes the regulatory sampling throughout your distribution network. You also have operational chlorine residual program monitoring for that acceptable disinfectant residual throughout your distribution network. And then when you have incidents such as adverse water quality incidents, you carry out the required reporting and notifications to the various agencies with immediate notifications required to the Ministry of Conservation, Environment, Conservation and Parks, Spills Action Center, to the local medical officer of health through York Region Public Health, to the owner, especially when it's health-related adverse, and then to the public, of course, if there were to be a water advisory or a precautionary one, what are the expectations for the residents to carry out? Through or from the effective monitoring and sampling programs, you also have reports. So those annual reports that are due to be publicly available February 28th every year, and then communications online and through members of council, they'll be receiving these reports as well. And then we have the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, an annual inspection program. So your water operating authority will see a drinking water inspector from the local district office to carry out the annual Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks inspections. The range of scores in these inspections have been 97 to 100% in recent years. And they make recommendations and best practices through their reports as well, such as a backflow prevention program recommendation. For those communities that don't yet have a formal backflow prevention program, this appears very commonly in ministry inspection reports. And then as a follow-up to those recommendations, you take actions and you track these actions in the continual improvement tracking mechanism that you have. The license is required to be able to operate a drinking water system in Ontario. And there are 5 parts to the municipal drinking water license. That license expires every 5 years. And there's a hard application deadline 6 months before the official expiry. So you'll see there's a couple dates listed under the first bullet. So the municipal drinking water license has a June 2026 expiry here. The hard application deadline is December 2025. and it is before that date. I'll point out to the bottom bullet for a minute. It's prior to December 2025 that you need to have prepared an updated sustainable drinking water system financial plan. The financial plan is one of the 5 parts of your municipal drinking water license. And in order to apply for a license renewal by December 2025, we have an approved financial plan for the water system by council as part of the application process. So just so you're aware of that. And then the other 5 parts, or the 5 parts of the drinking water license, includes the drinking water works permit, which is the physical description of your drinking water system. And it's a snapshot at that moment in time. And the drinking water works permit includes the conditions under which you're allowed to make minor modifications to your system without having to go for a formal approval through the ministry, or else it describes the conditions under which you require to apply for an application for the activities that you're proposing to make changes to your system. Permits to take water form part of those licenses for water suppliers, but that doesn't apply here as you're a distribution only system. The operational plan helps describe how you achieve the drinking water quality management standard here. And it is one of the 5 parts of your license. And there's a version that is submitted to the ministry for their receipt and approval once every license cycle, which is once every 5 years. And then that accreditation to the drinking water quality management standard, there's an annual audit by an accreditation auditor that verifies that you're consistently and continuing to meet the requirements of the drinking water quality management standard. And as mentioned, the financial plan also forms part of your municipal drinking water license. Annually, you carry out various quality management system activities, including maintaining a state of emergency preparedness. So that's one of the statements in the standard. And so with that, you carry out emergency response training. The last exercise was a cybersecurity attack training session in 22. And actually, it was a scenario that impacted your water supply first, and then it impacted your local systems here. And then in 2021, the emergency response training included water pressure issues. The last internal audit took place last November. Your external accreditation audit is next scheduled in March this year. And then ministry inspection. So they're carried out every January, it seems, because it was last January, but also just this past month as well. So the training session the training material was prepared before the last inspection. So you'll see a report. The ministry hasn't yet presented the report from this past January 2023 inspection. And so you'll see some results of that. And additionally, you have annual reports prepared again by February 28th every year and posted online annually. Also, every year, every calendar year, a management review has to take place that summarizes all sorts of out of ordinary conditions, such as incidents of noncompliance, incidents of adverse drinking water tests, any emergencies, operational performance statistics, and so on. And the outcomes of the management review make their way to you. So the results of the management review, it's a summary of the challenges and operational statistics and so on. And with that, you should receive it in spring timeline with identified deficiencies and decisions about these deficiencies, along with the action items planning to be taken. And then there's an annual budget process as well that considers the infrastructure review results. Infrastructure reviews have to take place as well every calendar year in consideration of those changing risks, right? So the outcome of the current risk assessment outcomes have to form part of the infrastructure review, and then that leads into your budget process and considers the asset management plans that you have in place as required by OREG 588. And then Reg 170 is called the Drinking Water Systems Regulation. Section 11 is about annual reports, and this is the content of what it shall contain, the annual report. It describes your drinking water system, and if you did treatment, it would list the water treatment chemicals used, a summary of the most recent water test results for the entire year, a summary of adverse test results and other issues, including a description of the corrective actions taken, a description of major expenses incurred to install, repair, replace required equipment, and the locations where this report is available, which is almost always the town's website. The risk assessments, the highest risks identified in your risk assessment relate to major water main breaks, the potential for backflow events, and possible microbiological contamination. And plans to address these relate to emergency water main break response and proper disinfection practices implemented in line with the province's water main disinfection procedure. As well, you're planning to implement a backflow prevention program with a bylaw that targets your highest risk users and the potential for the most severe situation first, and then working down the risks from there. And then you have over 45 town-owned sample stations, each of which are visited every month to grab samples from as required by regulations. And you have emergency management. And so starting from the bottom, you have potentially a water alert scenario that doesn't necessarily activate your water emergency plan or your corporate emergency plan. It's just to get operational staff on alert on, oh, if we were to have a power outage, pumps are not pumping necessarily, so you could see some pressure issues as an example, or severe weather like a cold snap could impact your water service lines, or also cold snaps can impact the occurrence of water main breaks. So you have staff being on alert on what are some potential issues we can encounter in our distribution system. A significant emergency for the water department would be like a water advisory. And so this is where you would see the municipal emergency control group activated, because a water advisory would be impacting public health and your residents in your community. And then your operational staff, of course, are fully engaged in the response activities, and both the corporate emergency plan as well as the operations emergency plan would be activated in this case. You could have a town-wide emergency that's not necessarily a water emergency, where a natural disaster could activate your corporate emergency plan. And so the town's emergency plan is activated, and your emergency control group is activated, and your operations services staff is potentially activated as well, depending on the impacts of that natural disaster on your water supply. Effective management includes customer service. Your water department staff have regular hours of operation, responding to customer calls directly between 8:30 and 4:30. And then there's an after hours answering by on-call staff as well. There is 24/7 staff coverage for water certified operators to be available 24/7 to answer calls and any emergency issues. There's same day call response with most issues resolved over the phone, coaching residents on what different aspects of their internal plumbing could be contributing to any problems encountered. There's also water efficiency bylaw for peak season demands. So you may encounter water use restrictions based on high demand times of the year, such as a date in July every year would be a high water use day. Water quality complaints mostly relate to discolored water and reduced pressure complaints locally to here, with often being plumbing related or appurtenances related types of issues contributing to those complaints. You have 62,500 customers keeping an eye on a system, and so calls in are indicators of potential problems for the operators to investigate. And then there's also the potential to expand community outreach and educational events to encourage drink your tap water. Key challenges you do, and any drinking water system anywhere has a system vulnerability to backflow events. For as long as you don't have a backflow prevention program, that's a fact. And so there is a system vulnerability to backflow events for as long as you don't have that formal program in place. Some challenges as well relate to maintaining water quality in new developments. So as new developments are built, you have these virtual dead ends as residents move in. And so the keeping in mind of water flows and keeping the water fresh and of good quality, again, with that goal of the furthest reaches in your distribution network, having good water quality. You have infrastructure sustainability and asset management related to your distribution only, system only, because of course, York Region operates the facilities and the water supply side of things. But for your distribution system, you have infrastructure, sustainability, and asset management in your challenges and in your responsibilities, increasing or changing customer expectations, and of course, always changing regulations. So lower limits to meet, more requirements, disinfection requirements to meet with water main breaks as an example, and monitoring of new parameters such as disinfectant byproducts, NDMA, THMs, HAA, and so on. And so policy direction from your point of view relate to your owner oversight role in major policy areas and programs such as the financial plan. Again, the financial plan is one of the 5 parts of your municipal drinking water license. And you can't have a license to operate a drinking water system if you couldn't demonstrate sustainability of your drinking water system. There's also your oversight of the annual budget process to ensure the sustainability of your water system. You have 10-year capital plans to ensure proper infrastructure planning is in place, and an emergency management for those potential emergencies or out of ordinary conditions you can encounter, and customer service to respond to ongoing calls and issues. And so this is the end of the presentation. And for more information, you can visit aurora.ca/water for reports and other system-specific information that we discussed this evening. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much for that rather informative presentation. Appreciate that. Could I get a motion to receive the presentation and open for discussion? Councillor Gartner, second by Councillor Kim. Any questions or comments? I have Councillor Weiss, but he's not. Councillor Gartner. Oh, Councillor Gartner.
Thank you. It was an opportunity to take off my mask. There are a couple of things that really concern me. One is that we, as a council, have legal responsibility, which means liability, as we are people with decision-making power. Would you say that's a true statement?
That is correct.
Thank you. And then, of course, we have our, under Mr. Downey, we have our operators, and we saw the chart and they all seem very well qualified. If we do, I want to know how we can mess up. If we do everything that you've got here, that you've told us, I mean, there's so many things, the financial part, the inspection, the testing, the qualified staff, I mean, it goes on and on. If we do all of that, and we really don't do it, we just, as a council, provide the money to have that done, then that releases us from liability.
Ms. Roth?
Through you, Madam Chair, this would be evaluated. It hasn't been tested. That statutory standard of care hasn't been tested in Ontario, but what we do know is the due diligence defense and evaluation of what preventive measures you've employed, what decisions you've made, how you've supported the needs of the drinking water system, all would factor in how this event played out. And so it would be almost a scrutiny applied after the incident has occurred. There would be a due diligence evaluation in that case. So unfortunately, there's no silver bullet that I can say, oh, I promise that you carry these activities out, that there wouldn't ever be a problem, although there would be an assessment of the role that the owner played. Now, that same statement under Section 19 of the Act also appears for water operators who are certified in Ontario. That same expectation to carry out your roles and responsibilities with diligence and honesty and skill and so on, that another person behind you would make the same decisions. That same statement applies from bottom up, top down. So the expectation is that there's a multi-barrier approach in a way with the way the regulations are written in Ontario.
Okay.
Councillor?
Two scenarios. What if one of our staff messes up, even though they're qualified, et cetera, and we have protocols in place? Where does that leave council? And the
Ms. Roth?
second question is, for example, here in the definitions, contamination. It's been known that people, especially in the past, maybe before Al and I were here, would pour things into the water. Or you'd have a facility, maybe a gas station or something that would pollute the water. So that may not be discovered so easily. So then set that second, where does council fit into liability in that situation?
Ms. Roth?
And so through you, Madam Chair, there have been examples under the Ontario Court Bulletins. So if you were to search the words Ontario Court Bulletins Environment or Ontario Environment Court Bulletins, you'll see a lot of the court cases that have been presented in Ontario under the Environmental Protection Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act included. And there are examples, or at least one that I can think of right now, where it was just the water operator that was charged and convicted and fined because it was a decision that he made to falsify information in a lab chain of custody. There's another scenario where there was an operator poor decision made in the carrying out of their duties, where there were not complete entries in a logbook, for example, and the owner was charged along with the operator. So both were charged because the owner allowed it to happen. So I don't have the full context of that, but there are scenarios where both the operator and the owner were fined with a conviction and fine.
Thank you. Mr. Downey, you're not going to let that happen, right? The second thing with contamination, because we don't know necessarily about contamination. So where would our liability be in that?
Ms. Roth?
And
Thank
through
you.
you, Madam Chair, there are raw water sampling programs that are legal requirements from each well. There is a requirement to monitor on a monthly basis the raw water quality from each well. And it's some of those results that would appear in your annual reports. There's continuous monitoring of your surface water supplies as well. So through Peel Region and the City of Toronto, they have continuous monitoring devices and instruments that monitor for key characteristics such as pH, temperature, turbidity, and so on,
Right.
to ensure that disinfection will be effective. There are surface water spills that are reported between Spills Action Center and each of the water suppliers in Ontario. Within the region I live in, the region of Waterloo, I know they can shut down their water intakes for the surface water supply 50 times a year because they have reported spills coming downstream or upstream, down to them. And you shut down the intake processes and allow the spill to pass. But there are other indicators like the pH and temperature and so on that help factor in.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions, but John Gallo, Council Gallo's waiting.
Okay. All right, perfect. Then we'll Councillor Gallo,
Well, that
we'll
must have
move
been
on to
5
you.
minutes.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I've been waiting to say that. Along the same lines as Councillor Gardner. And I'm just trying to paint a picture. And I have obviously no issue being responsible for the decisions that I make. I've always struggled with this, being responsible for the decisions that may occur down the line, even though we did everything that we were asked to do. We get reports from qualified staff to do certain things. And I don't think we've ever chosen not to do any of them. Obviously, that would be an issue and a red flag. And this all came out of Walkerton. I don't know whether or not council was found to be negligent in any way in the Walkerton situation, or it was down the line. I don't know the details of that, but I always struggle with this, including, let's say we did everything, and this might be a legal question, so I apologize. We've done everything that we need to do, and something does happen. Are we protected by our insurers if lawsuits come down the pipe? And I realize you may not be able to answer this, and I don't know if our solicitor is online or anyone else at the table. And it could be an answer for later on, but that's something I'd like to better understand. We obviously make decisions and provide funding, and to a certain degree, if I'm liable, I'm also giving delegated authority to staff to do the tasks that are necessary based on a plan. I don't know to what level that delegated authority is. I assume based on what you've described. So we're liable. We got a plan in place. Other people do it. We fund it, but we're still liable if something goes wrong.
Ms. Roth? Did you want to take this on?
While I don't have a proper answer that probably will satisfy you, a catastrophic scenario would be evaluated to determine the root causes, the things that contributed to the failure, and have intense scrutiny, unfortunately, especially if it caused illness and harm to your residents. And so if you did practice vigilance and you asked the questions that you needed to ask, and you supported the financial resources necessary, not just to maintain your systems, but also improve them over time, that would all be part of the evaluation. There are emergencies that still happen to you, unfortunately. So as far as a failure at all levels, and that we saw in the Walkerton inquiry, there was identification that was failure at all levels, including owner, senior decision makers, staff, the ministry, the environment, and failure of carrying out their oversight duties, and so on. So there was complacency everywhere. And so if you don't face your roles and responsibilities with complacency and with vigilance, there has to be something to support that. I don't have more to say beyond that, other than, emergencies can still happen. There are things that, like there was a pretty significant event within my community where a driller drilled directly into a 600 millimeter main, which caused a river to go into the downtown area, and 100,000 residents were impacted by that. So that was a contractor drilling into, and so these things can happen. But then the corrective actions and the evaluation of root causes and what you do after an event like that also speaks to your diligence and vigilance and in your decision-making capacity. I don't know if Ali, you're able to.
I didn't expect a lot, to be honest. So to be fair to, you had mentioned that we are only a distribution system.
Yes.
Is that correct? So
Yes.
we purchase water from Peel, Toronto, from
York
region, and our local wells are monitored by York region.
Yes.
So we don't do any of that. We don't determine where the water is coming from. We don't determine how much we pay for the water. We do periodic testing of the water.
Yes.
Is there more that we do other than that
Ms. Roth?
through you?
There's definitely grab sampling and the monitoring of chlorine residuals, that acceptable disinfectant level in your distribution system. That's definitely an operating authority responsibility, and your staff definitely verify the chlorine residual that is supposed to be in throughout your distribution network. The bacteriological samples, the microbiological samples that are taken in the number and quantity and from the sample taps that are owned by the town. There are over 45 that are sampled from every month, and additional samples taken, more than 45. And so there would be indicators of issues. There could be adverse water quality incidents because of maybe the sample taking process. It can show up from, having introduced a contaminant in that sample taking, or else it could be that it's an actual adverse, but you carry out the corrective actions in line with what the regulations specify. So Reg 170, being that drinking water system regulation, specifies when you do see certain adverse conditions, there are certain corrective actions that are expected to be taken. along with the immediate verbal notifications to Spills Action Center and the local medical officer of health, and then the written notifications within the 24 hours
So,
and so on.
So through you,
Counselor?
Madam Chair, our main responsibilities are once a month at those 40 some odd locations to test. The frequency is once a month.
So just so.
Mr. Downey?
This through you, Madam Chair, apologize. We're responsible for distribution. The region is responsible for treatment, determination of what level of treatment that is. Okay, and the provision of water to the municipality. We can fix the price to whatever we want. We pay a certain price to the region. We then determine what the price we're going to be charging the consumer. With regards to testing, we have over 45 sampling sites throughout the municipality. We do 20 samples 1 week, 18 the following, 18 the week after that, then we're back to 20 again. And so we test, so each one of those well sites would see at least a test, maybe one and a half times per month. We then make sure that those tests are properly, or those water samples are properly tested. The results are published, which you will see in a couple of weeks, and what actions were taken in order to address that. That's our main responsibility. We want to make sure that we distribute clean water to the residents of Aurora.
Counselor?
So just as a follow-up, Madam Chair, to that, so we do, obviously we do more frequently tests than once a month. And is it only on our well sites, or is it the water coming in from Peel, Toronto, or York region? Do we test that before it comes into our distribution?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Madam Chair, through the municipality, you'll see these blue standpipes. I don't know if you've actually seen them. Those are the sampling sites. So it's not necessary to the wells. It's all water coming into the municipality, whether it's from Peel, whether it's from City of Toronto, whether it's from a well site. The water distribution system is tested at different areas throughout the town.
Counselor?
Okay. So if so there's multiple people that are doing this. Is there some type of a program, like let's say someone notices something that isn't very kosher and is scared to lose their job to say something, type of whistleblower type of program, does that exist to any level, either internally or externally to the town?
Ms. Roth, did you want to answer this?
Yes, there exists definitely that under Reg 128, which is the regulation about the certification of water operators and water quality analysts. And there is a duty to report other observations. And so if I were a staff person at a water utility and I saw something done incorrectly or with negligence, it is now my duty. I have a legal responsibility to report it, or else I'm, what's the right word? I'm complicit in that activity.
Is it, through you, Madam Chair, is it anonymous?
It
That
could
person
be.
may fear losing their job if they do it.
I
publicly.
see.
Ms. Ruff?
It's
Yeah.
true, Madam Chair. Yes, there is an anonymous way. You can report to your local ministry district office, the Spills Action Center. And so on an annual basis, your inspectors come through and annually inspect systems. And there would definitely be a way for operators to report to the local district office anonymously. And
Okay.
then they would follow up.
Counselor?
I apologize for these questions, but when I'm responsible for something or liable for something, I kind of want to know what protocols are in place. The last one, through you, Madam Chair, you had mentioned that I think you said we don't have a backflow prevention bylaw. I guess we don't for residential, but we do for multi-residential and commercial and all of that, correct? I know we
Ms. Roth?
do.
That might have been my error. And so I'll turn it over to Al.
Mr. Downey? You want to take this one?
Through you, Madam Chair. We definitely have a bylaw. We definitely have a program. Bridge is very familiar with it. It was part of our continuous improvement program, so she was very happy to see it. It's a recommendation by the ministry. It's not a requirement, but and it's actively going on right now. And you are correct. We are concentrating right now on our ICI division. We are not anticipating at this point going to residential.
Counselor?
But we do multi-residential.
multi-residential like we do as
Yeah.
well. I apologize.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gartner for a second time.
I'm glad you're here, Mr. Nader-Rosny. So this is called taking care of your drinking water training for members of council. There's 4 members of council that attended. As we have a legal responsibility, then what about the training for the other 3 councillors who are not, or the 2 councillors and the mayor who are not here?
Just for clarity, Councillor Weiss did attend, but he attended a previous session, a more fulsome session.
Okay.
Because he's a new councillor, but I'll turn that over to Mr. Nader-Rosny. Comment.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I actually asked the same question. My understanding is that the duty is for us to hold this session for council as part of our regulatory, and not to insist that everybody take it, but there's obviously a great incentive for council to take it because you are, whether you're here or not, you are, doesn't diminish your responsibility for the system. But I would turn to our resident expert for a interpretation of that. I think that's.
Ms. Roth?
And through you, Madam Chair, I could communicate to you where the requirement is specified. So under the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard, element 9 is called roles, responsibilities, and authorities. And there is a requirement to not only describe roles and responsibilities and authorities to staff, but also to owners. And the best practice in the sector is that this is done with each new council or following elections, especially when there's a potential for turnover in council, and also as a refresher. And so there are these activities taking place because there's a duty to report or to communicate the roles, responsibilities, and authorities of the owner as well as staff.
Counselor?
And auditors, and auditors would look for that evidence that it has taken place.
Councillor Gartner?
Through you, Madam Chair. So the answer is, do the other 2 members of council have to take this? We didn't have, I know we had one of these training sessions somewhere between 26 and 2010. I don't remember having one since, but nothing happened. So that's passed, but
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Madam Chair, perhaps I can clear this up a little bit. There is a requirement by the ministry that council sign a document stating that they are aware of their responsibilities. I actually have it right here. I'll be asking each one of you to sign this. Councillor Weiss has already signed it. I will be also asking those members of council that are not present to sign it. It is their obligation to ensure that they have the knowledge or are aware of what their responsibilities are. That's one of the reasons I asked the clerk if this was being recorded. They're more than happy to take a look at the recording, but at some point I'm going to need a signature so that the auditor knows that council is fully aware of what their responsibilities are. So following the session, I'll be asking you to sign a document.
Councillor?
thank you. So just for simplicity, the counselors could be given the information or they have the information and could just be asked to study it and sign after that.
It's their responsibility.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor, are you, any other questions?
I just wondered what, maybe this is for Mr. Downey later, but we have hold on a second. We have a water tank and a regional pumping station in the same place. Is that a good combination?
Mr. Downey?
Few serve somewhat different purposes. So the water tank elevates the water so now you can get some head pressure.
Right.
Okay, and the pump helps pump that water up into the.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with sewage.
Nothing to do with sewage. Absolutely nothing to do
Okay,
with sewage.
okay.
There's at no point any cross
Thank you.
with regards to that.
Thank you very much.
Councillor, any other questions?
Done.
Okay. Councillor Gallo for the second time.
Thank you. Just in terms of reporting, it's an annual report, but what if there is an incident between reports? What triggers council's involvement in something that staff finds that we should probably be aware of. Through you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Downey, did you want to answer this?
Through you, Madam Chair, see how I do. That would be top management's responsibility. It would actually go through the chain, but ultimately top management responsibility, the chief administrator or myself would be reporting that to council, and that would be our obligation.
And how do we,
Counselor,
through
sorry.
you, how do we know, how do you know what should be reported and what shouldn't be reported? Is there some matrix?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Madam Chair, we would be able to determine whether or not it had any impact on the owner's liability or responsibility for the water system. So we know that the system throughout the year goes through breaks, it goes through adverse testing. Those reports are presented to council on an ongoing basis. You're talking about an issue that would be well outside of what the norm would be. And that would then be our responsibility to make sure that council was aware of that. But presently we haven't, as far as I know, ever ran into a situation where that would be elevated to council immediately.
Councillor Gallo?
Okay, let's hope it never does. Is it possible to schedule some type of a tour? Maybe Councillor Weiss might want to as well, of our system, and just to see what the testing is like, and just to get a visual of how we go about doing the responsibilities that we're responsible for. Through you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Downey, I was going to ask the same thing.
Through you, Madam Chair. So our responsibility is testing. So we're happy to provide an opportunity for council to accompany one of our operators to a testing site. You can see them where they go and put it into the water bottle. And then we send that water bottle off for testing, and we get those results back. So you would basically be seeing them pour water into a bottle from a testing site, but happy to have you in attendance if you wish.
So none of the pumping stations, none of that, the staff is not responsible for any of those facilities.
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Madam Chair, there's one pumping station that the town is responsible for. However, it is not operating at this point. We do not need it. And it is there simply for emergency in case of an emergency. It was originally needed to ensure there was sufficient water pressure. However, with additional development, we were able to create or recreate the zone to eliminate the need for that pumping station.
Councillor?
Okay,
Fair enough. Good.
I don't think I need to see someone fill a water bottle, but
I can say that I actually did that tour.
did you? So what
And
was it for?
it was, you were filling a water bottle, but it was actually very educational because it walked you through the process of how they were testing it and where they got the water from, and explained the duration and time that it would take to get those results. So similar to explaining the system, but I kind of find it educational just knowing that that was the process.
All
It
right.
made me feel comfortable that that work was being done and how, which, why, and where. So I think it's beneficial. I did it in warmer weather because it is outside.
I
So
wouldn't mind. We could
perhaps.
schedule something. The last thing is equal to what we're responsible for. Staff is obviously, as described, responsible. Are they also responsible to sign a document and do whatever it is that they need to do?
Ms. Ruff?
Absolutely. Anything that is signed is a legal record. Even an intentional error on a chain of custody, which is that one example I spoke of the personal charge and conviction, that was just on a chain of custody, which is a record that goes to the lab that accompanies the samples. And so anything that you're signing your name to, you're attesting that this is true and accurate and real information. And if you sign something that you either didn't do or was not accurate, that's a personal decision then by that water operator or that water quality analyst. So they hold a certification that presumes that they'll carry out their duties with diligence and vigilance and honesty and care as much as in your decision-making roles. That, like I said, it's almost exactly the same wording for statutory standard of care to the operator certification regulation as well.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor?
Madam Chair, I see our solicitor at the top there, and I'm wondering if I could pose her the same question I asked before about our liability and insurance coverage if something happens beyond our control, and to what extent we're protected.
Certainly. Let's see if Ms. DeCerio might be prepared. If she is, that's great. If not, we can get an answer a little bit offline later, but did you want to ask the question now and then she can answer?
Sure. So we're liable for water. To the extent that's supposed to do, we fund, we have programs in place, we do everything at this table that's required of us. Something happens down the line. To what extent are we liable? And if lawsuits end up happening, to what extent would our insurer cover us?
Ms. DeCerio?
Through you, Madam Chair. If council has done everything that they had to do, then they wouldn't be liable. If there were any lawsuits, the insurance company would likely cover it. I knew you had asked the question, so I asked quickly to our risk manager, and she said we don't believe it's an exclusion to the policy. And in any event, even if, let's say it was, the town does have an indemnification bylaw, and the town would indemnify all of the councilors.
Councilor Gallo?
Music to my ears. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? No, I just have some quick ones because I know we're tight on time. I know that you were talking about some reporting that was going to be recently received and how everything was supposedly online. I just kind of want to know where people were to point to that, where we would find that online. Is it something that the residents could click on? Is it somewhere hidden? Is it easy to find? I just would like to know that I could, go and check up on it every now and then. Mr. Downey, I don't know. Just looking at you.
Through you, Madam Chair. So the reports are provided to council as information reports. So there will actually be an information report coming to February's general committee. I believe the next one on water quality. And that is as all reports are held with the clerk, and you can access any report because it is a public document through that process.
Thank you. And I guess a question, I don't know if it's for communications, but not here, Mr. Natarozny. Do we have a water quality section or somewhere there's a subsection of water quality, so we don't have to go digging through reports, finding these reports, where we can just go to a section saying water quality and all the reports underneath?
I'll have to look into that and see exactly how that's organized on our website. So it would be available through the council agendas, of course, where the reporting, all the reports are. But in terms of consolidation of water on the website, I'm not aware of how that's organized. I'd have to get back to you.
Okay, perfect. I'd appreciate that. And one final question is, and I think Councilor Gao touched on it, but we didn't really elaborate too much, was with the matrix. So I know we talk about the high quality water and what that means. There's really no definition in what that means. So is there something that's provided to council with kind of that chart to say it should have X amount of chlorine, X amount of, pH, X amount of whatever, and what that matrix is, so we can understand when we are looking at these reports or down the road, or a quick chart, so we understand what those standards are. I don't know if it's Ms. Roth or Ms.
Through you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to confirm, I was given an answer that there is a water webpage, water specific page with the annual reports on it. I confirmed it with Justina here. And with regards to good quality, the province defines what are acceptable water quality parameters through Ontario Reg 170, the Drinking Water Systems Regulation, through its water main disinfection procedure, which is available freely online. And so if you had a water main break or new construction activities, it specifies what disinfection requirements need to be met. In a chloraminated system, there's a definition within the water main disinfection procedure for an acceptable disinfectant concentration for chloramines, and that's 1.0 milligrams per liter of combined chlorine, which is for a chloraminated system. And so there are acceptable criteria that you're looking for in the distribution network. And actually, with every microbiological sample that is taken, there's also a residual taken at the same time to confirm that acceptable disinfectant. So it's not just the chlorine residuals monitoring that you do week by week, but also with each of the grab samples you take, there's an expectation that you confirm the acceptable concentration as well as through maintenance activities. And there's also a regulation 169. If you were to look it up, it's a series of tables. So Reg 169 is called the Ontario Drinking Water Quality Standards. And so you'll see there's a bacteriological table, a chemical table, and a radiological table. And these parameters help specify what the maximum allowable concentration is for each potential parameter that you're sampling for. And there are triggers. If you reach half of these maximum allowable concentrations, there's an increased sampling program that is expected through regulations. So you should never be surprised by a parameter in your network that is exceeding a maximum allowable concentration.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Any other questions at all? Seeing none, no other questions or comments. So I guess we'll call the vote to receive the presentation and the report in front of us. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you so much, Ms. Roth. Item 6, we are now ready to adjourn this council workshop education session. May I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Gartner, Councillor Kim, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. I guess we're going to do a 5-minute. Okay. 5-minute break and we will be back. Thank you.